He was Brazil's most popular political leader, a two-time president whose run in the 2022 election against Jair Bolsonaro is widely expected. 20 years after his first election, can Lula da Silva make a political comeback and become president of Brazil for the third time? We speak with President Lula in an exclusive interview. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Rida Fakhri. Following a 6-month investigation into the government's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, Brazil's Senate voted this week to recommend charges against President Jair Bolsonaro for crimes against humanity. With a population of 213 million, Brazil, the most populous country in South America, has recorded over 600,000 COVID deaths. That's the second highest in the world after the United States. Before the pandemic, Brazilians already faced rising poverty across the country. Today, a new study shows that 55% of the population, 117 million people, suffer from food insecurity. Almost 20 million face actual hunger. With a presidential election next year, many expect the man who is widely credited with lifting 20 million Brazilians out of poverty with the zero hunger and other social welfare programs he established during his presidency from 2003 to 2010 to run for a third term next year. Luiz Inacio Lula da Silva came to power promising to reform his country's political and economic systems and to eradicate hunger. During his 2 terms in office, Lula presided over Brazil's longest period of economic growth in 3 decades. And despite his conviction on corruption charges in 2017, which was eventually annulled by the Supreme Court earlier this year, he has remained hugely popular, especially among Brazil's working class. Aus Haidari with more on Lula's political rise and fall and possible comeback.
Luiz Inacio Lula da Silva, a former shoeshiner, quit school after the 2nd grade. From rural poverty, he became a prominent union organizer. A founding member of the Workers' Party, Lula ran for president 3 times. He won his 4th presidential race in 2002. The first Brazilian working-class president, Lula da Silva, was re-elected in 2006. He left power in 2010 with 90% approval rating, having lifted over 20 million out of acute poverty.
I don't think we were able to do everything we wanted to do, but I think we managed to do more than what was done during any other historical period in this country.
In July 2017, Lula was convicted on charges of money laundering and corruption in a controversial trial surrounding Operation Car Wash. He was sentenced to 9.5 years in prison. The corruption conviction prevented Lula from running in the 2018 presidential election won by Jair Bolsonaro, a polarizing figure whose critics say has destroyed the environment. After 580 days in jail, Lula was released from prison on November 8, 2019, pending appeals.
You can be sure that we will not see traveling around this country, not only making their lives hell, but praising the possibility that the Brazilian people can't continue facing what it is facing now.
In March 2021, the Supreme Court concluded the presiding judge in the corruption cases was biased and annulled the criminal convictions against Lula. Lula, who's 76 years old, is widely expected to run in next year's presidential elections. Current polls put him ahead of Bolsonaro.
With elections scheduled for October 2022, Lula is widely expected to face President Bolsonaro, although to date, neither has officially declared their candidacy. According to the latest opinion polls, Lula holds a commanding lead over his likely rival and political opponent. Joining me now from Sao Paulo is former President Luiz Inacio Lula da Silva. President Lula, it's great to have you on the program. Thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure.
President Lula, you have been extremely critical of the current Brazilian government. You've called President Bolsonaro, quote, an agent of genocide. He is now accused in a Senate report of crimes against humanity. Do you call for his prosecution? Should the president face criminal charges for the 600,000 COVID-related deaths in Brazil?
Well, first of all, it's important to say that it's very difficult for a former president of the republic making critique for those that are now in charge of the country. The fact of the matter is that the president of Brazil today, he does not rule, he does not govern, he has no human relationship with COVID-19. He didn't take care of the pandemics, he disrespected science, he did not believe in the guidance of the experts. He did not keep the humility with the state governors. He despised a scientific orientation. He didn't want to take vaccines. He didn't want the people to take vaccines. And he started to prescribe drugs that had no scientific guidance to fight COVID-19. So that's why he has liability for the death of 600,000 people that died in Brazil. And besides that, he does not govern Brazil. He doesn't understand economics. He doesn't understand international relations. He doesn't understand foreign affairs. He doesn't understand social movements. He doesn't understand absolutely nothing about nothing. When I was reelected in 2002, the great motto in my campaign was that the hope had surpassed fear. The victory of Bolsonaro means that ignorance surpassed intelligence and won over the intelligence, and Brazil's paying a high price for that. And so I expect that in 2022, people would reestablish democracy in Brazil in 2022, and elect someone that is a true Democrat, someone that is a human person that enjoys and loves the people.
President Bolsonaro, there's no doubt, made some troubling statements. He took troubling decisions, to say the least. But can a President Bolsonaro, be criminally liable for the pandemic? Could anyone have prevented the death toll caused by an unprecedented virus, a worldwide pandemic? And by the same token, should former US President Trump be prosecuted for his handling of the pandemic? I mean, there are obviously many similarities between the way Bolsonaro and Trump handled this.
I am convinced that yes. The truth of the matter is that Bolsonaro is a copycat, a faithful copycat of what Trump was in the US. And Bolsonaro followed all the guidelines of President Trump, former President Trump. He said that the vaccine would not solve anything. He used to say that you didn't have to use masks. He said that you didn't have to avoid crowding, and he would prescribe a drug that is a drug to confront malaria and to fight COVID, going against all the scientific orientation in Brazil. So that's why in some moment, either a court in Brazil or an international criminal court, he could be judged, put on trial for the crimes that he committed.
Would you like to see him put on trial for these crimes, if not within the justice system in Brazil at the International Criminal Court?
I believe that he has to be put on trial in Brazil. We have now a congressional investigation committee at the Senate, and this report was shown to the Brazilian society, and it's going to be sent to the Attorney General of the Republic. And this report, the Senate report, will go to discussion in the civil society. And the judiciary branch of power has the competency to put him on trial. I have not read the report yet. I don't know all the charges against Bolsonaro and other persons, but I know that there is the intent to open a judicial case in other courts outside Brazil too. But I have the awareness that the Brazilian justice system can put on trial Bolsonaro. They have the mistakes that he committed and to the way he treated the pandemics. I believe that the Brazilian justice system can put him on trial, but certainly we're going to have brought to some cases, judicial cases against him too.
But do you have faith in the independence of the justice system in Brazil? Because of course Bolsonaro is saying that these charges would be politically motivated. You yourself faced corruption charges, was convicted, spent close to 20 months in jail before the charges against you were annulled. Do you have full trust in the Brazilian justice system?
Olha, não se trata de ter fé.
Well, it's not to have faith or not faith. I have faith in God. In justice, I have the belief that it will fulfill its mission. Look, when I faced those charges, I went to the federal police. I could have left Brazil. I could have gone to exile, but I went to prison. I wanted to prove that the charges against me were lies, that they had political motivations, and they set up a gang using federal prosecutors and by the judge that put me on trial. I'm not saying that Bolsonaro is guilty. There's a charge against Bolsonaro. Daily charges made by the Brazilian media, charges that are being made by the report from the Congress, from the Senate. And so Bolsonaro will have time, the necessary time to explain himself, because the people, his people that went to the Congress hearings, they did not explain. They didn't say. Those that went to the hearings in the Senate, they stayed in silent. They were protected by a habeas corpus of the Supreme Court. And those that said something at the congressional hearings, they lied. So I believe that the justice system, Bolsonaro will have time to explain himself to the justice system. He can do what I did. He can prove that he's innocent. I don't want to convict him in advance. I believe that he committed the crimes, yes, but he said no, so he has to prove that he did not commit the crimes. When I was arrested, I said, I will not exchange my dignity for my freedom. I am going to prove that those that made those charges lied, and those that charged induced the Brazilian media to also lie for many years about the charges against me. I don't know if you're aware, I am the most censored politician in the Brazilian history, and the censorship continues against me in the media. So I believe that Bolsonaro will have some time. Now he's going to pick up the judicial cases if he's indicted, and he'll have the time to defend himself in the judicial system. And that's what he has to do in the justice system. And that's what everybody that is innocent has to do.
Despite the Senate report, though, few expect him to be officially indicted or to face trial because Brazil's Attorney General is a Bolsonaro appointee. And that is why some are openly talking of a referral to the International Criminal Court. As a former president of Brazil, would you like to see a Brazilian president tried by the ICC?
Well, that depends on the crime. It could be judged by the International Court. What we have to see is that we can't commit crimes. If he committed a crime, International Criminal Court could convict him. That is for any person, not only for Bolsonaro. What I believe is that now he'll have the opportunity to prove that the charges against him are not true. And against him and another 60 people that are being charged by the report from the Senate. This is what we're expecting, that now he can prove that he did not challenge science, that he did not challenge medicine, that he did not change the World Health Organization, because if he had bought the vaccines in the timely fashion, he would have avoided at least half of the death tolls that happen in Brazil. This is a fact. Now, if the justice system here in Brazil or abroad convict him for that, that depends on the justice system. But the fact of the matter is that he could have taken action and avoided half of the thousands of deaths that happen in this country, because it's already proven that the major guarantee that we have against COVID-19 is the vaccine. It's to avoid the crowding and to use masks and use social distancing. These are the minimum care that we have to have. Myself, I have already took the third booster shot, and I continue to use masks. I continue to wash my hands very well, and I do not participate in crowding meetings. And this is the guidance that the President of the Republic should have given to its people, and he did not do that. He did not give this guidance. In Brazil, Guida, we have a major problem to be concerned. We have also to be concerned with the hunger. We have 19 million people that do not have their meals. They don't have the minimum calories and proteins that they have, that is necessary for the human beings. And we have 160 million people that are undergoing some kind of food insecurity, that do not have the necessary calories and proteins intake of these products. And we have 15 million unemployed people and 33 million people that are under precarious work. So Brazil is facing social issues that we had ended in 2012. And so Brazil had ended with hunger, Brazil had full employment in 2014. Brazil had full employment rates. The unemployment rate was 4.3% in 2014. So Bolsonaro has already committed many other political crimes since he took office. And now we have to be concerned with ourselves, not only to save human lives, which is the most important thing, but we have to avoid that people should become even poor and going under hunger and are unemployed. We have to rebuild Brazil, and the Brazilian people will solve that in the next presidential election in 2022.
Precisely, Brazilians will have the opportunity to render their verdict, to have some kind of a referendum on Bolsonaro's first term in next year's elections. You haven't formally announced your candidacy for the election. You haven't formally started campaigning, but you are already ahead in the polls. You've said much will depend on just how fit, both physically and mentally, you feel. You were born on the 27th of October, 1945, so happy birthday. 76, but you say you have the energy of a 30-year-old. You've already served 2 terms as president. Why would you seek a 3rd term? Is it some kind of vindication for the prosecutions and the jail time that you had to endure?
Well, first of all, I can't imagine to compete for the vendetta, for vindication. No, I'm not running because I want to be a candidate. If I place myself as a candidate, I'm going to be by the party that I represent that will have to choose me first. It's the most political party that we have in Brazil. And I should say, it's important to say that the Workers' Party is the most political party in the Latin American left. It's not that Lula that wants to be a candidate. If Lula is a candidate, is the set of forces, of political force. And a lot of people in civil society want me to be a candidate, for me to run, because people understand that who did what I did during office in 2003 and 2010 has acquired the right and credibility to go back to office. I think that the main serious problem is this one here, that Brazil is being destroyed now, and the people are depositing, and the polls show that the people are depositing in my person or in my candidacy the possibility to recover Brazil. When I left the presidency here, Brazil was the 6th largest economy of the world. Brazil is the 15th largest economy. Brazil had full employment, and today we have 15 million people unemployed. Inflation rate was 4.5. Today, inflation is around 10%, 10.5% inflation rate in Brazil. So that is to say, Brazil was used to be a very happy country, a joyful country with development, with no hate. We have no litigation with any country in the world. This is the country that the people want back again, that the world was proud of to receive Brazilians. And so what the people think is that I could recover for the Brazilian people the joyfulness of being Brazilian, to have 3 meals a day, the right to have a job, the right for people, the poorest people, to have the right to attend university, to go to technical schools, vocational training schools, to travel, to have access to culture. This is the kind of Brazil that people want back, and this is the Brazil that I can give them back again with the help of the Brazilian people. And this is what makes me, if I'm going to run candidate, to become president, because I believe that we have the conditions to recover Brazil and put Brazil once again as a global player.
You've just made a passionate case for why you should run. Are you willing to say unequivocally that you will run in 2022? I'm willing to bet with you that you will. Are you willing to bet against me?
I can't say here that I will be a candidate, because I want to define this between February and March next year, and it doesn't depend on me, but it depends on my party and the set of political forces. Well, one thing I can say to you, one thing I can tell you now: if I run and a candidate, we will win the elections, and democracy will come back to reign in our country. Joyfulness, self-esteem, and hope will be back and will take over the Brazilian people, and will become once again a happy country as we were when we ruled Brazil.
And when you did rule Brazil, when you were in office between 2003 2010, you were one of the most popular leaders in the world. At some point, your approval ratings in Brazil were at 90%. And yet, just a few years later, you have this right-wing president. How do you explain this? Are people in Brazil whimsical? Is democracy capricious? Or is it simply a pendulum that constantly swings?
Rida, você é uma
Hida, you are a journalist that is very intelligent, and you traveled a lot around the world, and you just covered many conflicts. You know that in the last year, 15 or 20 years, on the part of the society, and especially from the mass media, the destruction of politics. They're very much against politics. And so when you destroy politics, when you deny politics, when you don't believe anymore in politics, what comes after politics is always worse, not better. What comes after politics is Nazism, fascism, authoritarian rules, bizarre things. That was Trump in the US, and it was Bolsonaro here in Brazil. And so what do you want? We want to value politics, because the way out for humanity, the way out to end with hunger, the way out to make that the wealth be more distributed in equitable terms is through politics. It's the politics, and politics is what allows us to have a turn in power. And so if the people believed in a right-wing discourse, a fascist speech, if they believed in a backwardness discourse in the US and in Brazil and in Hungary, well, these people can change their opinion afterwards. And our role is to convince the people that the mistake that was made in the past elections have to be corrected in the next elections. And this can only be done through politics. And so that's why I say every day that there's no way out politics. There's no way out. We have to have strong political parties. You have to have serious politicians, and so that we can make the changes. This is the fact of the matter. I want to give the right for you to choose your president as you may wish. And if he makes a mistake, you take him out of office and put someone else. That's how democracy works. That's how politics works.
But how do you restore people's trust in politics and politicians? Because many believe that an eventual race between you and Bolsonaro would create a very polarized election. You mentioned the issue of choice, a choice between the far right and the left, the far left. Would Brazil not be better off with a more centrist leader, a new leader?
Well, Brazil will only be in a better way with a candidate that will be elected by the majority of the Brazilian people. I have already ran for election against 12 candidates. I was the only one that was from the labor movement. I was the only one that knew the shop floor in a plant and that had lived in the periphery of this country. I ran against 12 celebrities in the first presidential elections in 1989 that I ran. I think that polarization is part of political dispute. You can see polarization between Trump and Biden. And here in Brazil, you're going to have polarization between Lula and Bolsonaro. The Workers' Party's always polarized since 2002 and since 1989, the first presidential elections. The Workers' Party was in second in 89, the second in 94, in 98. It was the first one that won in 2002, the first one in 2006, in 2010, in 2014, and the second in 2018. And now I'm going to be the first one again in the next election to show you that the polarization is part of democracy. We just had polarization in Germany between the SPD and CDU. Who won was SPD. And who won the elections will rule, and those that lost the elections will cry and prepare themselves for the next elections. Here in Brazil, I am convinced in Brazil that the central dispute will be between democracy and fascism. I'm not going to say between the good and the evil, because that would be too presumptuous on my side, but it will happen between the people that believe in democracy, for those that believe in the economic development, that those that believe in environmental issues as fundamental values for the new development model that the world needs, that enjoys the people, that want to take care of people, and those that don't enjoy the people, they don't want to take care of the people, for those that enjoy democracy and those that don't enjoy democracy. I think that democracy will win.
And because of all the work you did when you were in power in lifting millions of people out of poverty, in achieving economic health for Brazil as a whole, you do remain hugely popular. But you also have your detractors who believe that you and Your Workers' Party are a symbol of corruption, of economic mismanagement. Just how difficult is it for any leader of Brazil to dismantle systemic corruption?
Olha, deixa eu te falar uma coisa.
Well, Hilda, let me say something to you. I believe that corruption is proven around the world, that it happens in all countries. And there's no solution if you don't have the tools to fight corruption. Hilda, when you come to Brazil the next time and you choose a big lawyer to make an interview, and you'll see that all the tools to fight corruption were developed during my government and the Workers' Party government. We created all the tools, all the mechanisms, and even from the general controlling office that was chosen by the federal prosecutor's office. I was not the one that chose. I choose the federal prosecutors from a list that was sent by the prosecutors, and then we would send to the Senate. We created the transparency portal in the internet, and we created the law, the bill of free information access, and all the journalists knew about all the information on government, and they would follow each government expenditure in real time through this portal. Never before in the history of Brazil, a government that was more transparent than the Workers' Party government, the government that created all these tools against corruption. So that's why when I was convicted here, that I could have left the country. I didn't want to leave the country to exile. I wanted to prove that the prosecutor's office was lying. I wanted to prove that the judge was lying on my trial. And now it's funny, we had already 2 public opinion polls that the people say that I am the most prepared, well-prepared candidate to fight corruption in this country. And they know it's true, because during the Workers' Party government, we created the mechanisms that would allow that people could be overseen in a very rigid way. The oversight was very.
But looking at the broader electoral political system in the country, when you have 30 political parties, is it a recipe for all types of corruption? The Brazilian Congress as well seems quite unmanageable, possibly even a source of Brazil's systemic corruption, isn't it? When you have no fewer than 16 parties who are represented in the Senate, 24 in the Chamber of Deputies. Is this conducive to effective governance, or should it be a priority to change the electoral system?
Rida, a reforma política.
Here, the political reform is not something that could be done by the President of the Republic. The political reform of the political system has to be done by the political parties themselves. And I agree with what you said. You can't go on with a coalition government with 33 political parties. It's very difficult for you to have a coalition to govern Brazil. In Brazil, we don't have political parties, true political parties, with the exception of the Workers' Party and some other left-wing parties. In Brazil, what we have is co-ops of deputies, of representatives in the Congress. There's no possibility. You don't have leadership in the Congress that could speak for their caucus. And many times for the leadership don't speak on behalf of the political party, because each individual representative in the Congress have their share in the national budget. And that is something absurd. And so each one speak for themselves. So I am convinced, and I agree with you to say that Brazil needs a political reform in its system. And it's not democratic for you to have 33 political parties. You can have less political parties. You can have party leaders that are truly representatives. You can have very representatives bench on the Congress, and then you can govern building a coalition, a pact, and to make many other program agreements, which happens in any other democracy in the world. This is something that we're going to have to work hard a lot so that the political parties could accept the idea of a reform of the political system, so that we can give more seriousness to the political system in Brazil.
When it comes to foreign policy, President Lula and Brazil's fractured relations with much of the world, especially China and the US in the last year or so, these relations have taken quite a hit. Just how quickly do you think you will be able to rebalance these relationships should you be re-elected?
Here, during 8 years of my term in office as president of Brazil, I talked with many political leaders that it was necessary for us to have an innovation at the UN. The UN cannot continue being the photography of 1948. You have to, the geopolitics of the world has changed since 48, and the UN has to change too. The UN system, they have to have more countries inside. It has to have representatives from Latin America, from Africa, from Asia at the UN Security Council. Germany has to be there at the Council, Japan, the most important countries, India, Turkey could also be in the UN Security Council. What is important is that the council that is of 5 countries that are part of the UN Security Council should open themselves so that the UN could be more representative and have more power. Today, the UN represents not much, actually. The same UN that in 1948 advocated and gave strength to build the Israeli state has no strength to guarantee the Palestinian state. They don't even manage to guarantee the demarcation of the land that was given to the Palestinian people. So it's necessary that the UN should become more representative, that it should not have an owner, because it can't be only the China and US, Great Britain, UK, Russia, and China to have control over the UN. You need more people at the UN Security Council to become more represented so the UN could avoid the amount of conflicts, unnecessary conflicts that exist today. For example, if the UN had strength, power, the US would have not told a lie to invade Iraq. You know very well, you know the history, that the story that was told that Iraq had chemical weapons, weapons of mass destruction. That was a lie. That was just a pretext for the US and the UK to invade Iraq. What did they find in Iraq? Nothing, because there were no chemical weapons there. And so the world cannot live on the base of lies. And that's the appeal that I've been doing every time that I can to the leaders, the political leaders of the world. That's the appeal that I make. They have to act with much more seriousness so that we can make democracy rule, so that we can make peace rule, and so that we could put education first, and so that we can end with hunger around the world. Everybody would have the right to have 3 meals a day. And so we have to end with the inequality in the planet. And the UN, if it was stronger, if it was more representative, it would give a tremendous contribution to the world of peace, for a more developed world, and a world with less wealth concentration as we have today.
But is the answer making the UN Security Council more representative, enlarging the Security Council, as you argued during your tenure? One of your main foreign policy goals was to make Brazil a permanent member of the Security Council. Is that still the goal, and would that have made any difference as long as the structure of the United Nations and its Security Council remains the same? The veto is held by those 5 permanent members.
Well, let me say something, Rita. I'm not demanding only for Brazil. I believe that Latin America could have 2 representatives at the UN Security Council. The continent in Africa could also have 2 or 3 representatives from the African continent. Asia could have more representatives. I think that we should have no other country to have veto powers. Things have to be discussed in a democratic way so that the UN could regain credibility. Do you know that in politics, credibility is 50% of the success of everything that we'll try to do? Let me tell you a short story. In my passage by Turkey with Prime Minister Erdogan, we went to Iran together to reconcile, to change the enrichment uranium policy in Iran. And the Foreign Affairs Minister of Turkey, Erdogan, myself, and Celso Amorim, the Brazilian foreign minister. And we managed to reach an agreement with the Iranians, much better than the agreement that the Americans have today. But when we made that agreement, that had the agreement of President Obama, when we managed to sign the document and make the deal, the agreement, what happened? With the US and European Union, they increased the sanctions against Iran. They did not accept that Brazil and Turkey could play a role and have the success that they have to establish with Ahmadinejad a peace agreement, that the enrichment of uranium was only for peaceful means for nuclear power. And we even said that Turkey would be the one that would be liable for the uranium that would be provided to Iran. And when we thought that the world as a whole would applaud the agreement that we reached with Iran, the whole world were jealous, because Brazil and Turkey they didn't have the size that they to make such a kind of agreement. And it was unfortunate that the world is like that. It's very unfortunate that people do not have the understanding that only through peace and only through development and only through with the wealth distribution in an equitable way that will build a world of peace that the humanity needs so much.
And could that ever happen without fundamental reform of the international system? The world has evolved so much since World War II, yet the architecture seems to have remained static. Is there an urgent need for a new international economic and political order, for a new international security order? Simply put, for a new order that is more equitable, more just, that will spare the planet from all kinds of disasters, climate change, other man-made disasters. Would a President Lula be at the vanguard of that fight?
Olha, eu não diria que eu seria na vanguarda.
I wouldn't say that I would be in the vanguard. I would be together to build a new world governance. I believe that no country has the right to blockade another country with a UN decision. The UN could have interventions to avoid wars. UN should intervene so that we should take more seriously the climate change world issue on planet Earth, and not only try to avoid the development of the poor countries, we should try to contain the development of the rich countries, because the UK till today has not paid the damage that it gave to the planet Earth when they polluted the ozone layer by their industrial revolution. So UK has a debt to humanity. It has a debt to our planet. They can't put the blame on the shoulders of the developing country or the poor countries. And so the environmental issue today here is so serious. It's such a serious matter that no country in the world could think any kind of development policy that could not take into account for once and for all the need for us to breathe a pure air, to have less pesticides in food, and to have a better water, and to avoid the defrost of the ice caps. And so it's necessary to have more responsibility, and the UN could do that. The EU can take care of this. But if the union has much more representativity, and I can say to you here that I'm going to fight a lot so that the union could come back to play a more representative role in world matters and a more democratic role in world society.
On a concrete level, though, what can happen? What do leaders have to do? Because as you know, on climate change, COP26 is around the corner, and the leaders of China, Russia, and many others won't be in attendance. What do you think needs to happen concretely on Brazil's exploitation and deforestation of the Amazon, which also plays a significant part in this issue? Because just 2 years ago, a study found that the growth in Brazil's CO2 emissions was driven by the deforestation in the Amazon, which accounted for 44% of Brazil's emissions. What needs to happen?
Rita, now, in terms of environmental issues, there's a lot of people that are good doing speeches, but a lot of people that don't put in practice 10% of what they say in their speeches. The US, till today, has not signed the Kyoto Protocol. Many countries have not adhered to the Paris Treaty. In 2009, I went to COP15 in Copenhagen, and Brazil took the commitment to diminish in 80% of the deforestation of the rainforest. And we fulfilled that commitment, but the other countries did have to abide to what they say. And we want effectively to say to the world, we do not need to deforest the rainforest to plant soya beans and cattle. We have a lot of land to plant without deforesting. What we need is to convince society, civil society, that the forests standing, it could be more profitable for the development of Brazil than if we have the deforestation. What we need is to collectivize the scientific studies about the wealth of biodiversity of the Amazon rainforest and to withdraw from the biodiversity of the Amazon part of the wealth for sustainability of almost 25 million people that live in the rainforest. And besides, on the part of the Amazon that is in Peru, Venezuela, and Colombia, what we need is to be more intelligent. We shouldn't stay fighting against nature but we have to live with nature in an adequate fashion. What I can say to you, Rita, is that in Brazil, we have many businessmen from agribusiness that are against deforestation, that they want to help to keep the forests and to sustain our water quality. They're not in favor of pollution of pesticides for agricultural production. And these advocate and defend the environment because they need to have influence in the international markets. But there are others that don't want to do that. They should be punished, the other businessmen. They should be punished by reality. And so I believe here that we need now on November the 26th, if I'm not mistaken, in Glasgow, we should take responsibility and start to pass certain decisions and resolutions in the environmental level that we should fulfill. Each country has to put inside their government and make that their national Congress should pass the resolutions that would pass in international meetings, because we made the decisions in the multilateral fora. When we go back to inside our countries, no Congress, domestic Congress, passes what was approved in the international meetings. And so it's necessary that we should have more seriousness from the political class. It's necessary that we should have more seriousness from the heads of state. It's necessary for us to discuss with in a much more careful way, what kind of energy we're going to produce on the planet Earth from here onwards. What kind of energy we're going to produce that will be clean energy, that should be highly renewable in terms of its sources, and we don't have to use the kind of fossil fuel energy system that is pollutant. And this is the world that we have to fight for, and we have to convince all the countries in the world. There's no country that is more important than the other when we're dealing with environmental issues. A small island sometimes is as important as a country the size of the US. What is necessary is to prevail democracy and the fulfillment of the decisions that were made at the multilateral institution. That's why the UN has to change. That's why the UN has to change the system, and the Bretton Woods system has to change too. The IMF has to change. The World Bank has to change.
President Lula, what you're saying is what many leaders might be saying as well. Everyone seems to agree that something needs to be done about climate change, but no government wants to make the hard decisions. Next year will mark the 30th anniversary of the 1992 Rio Earth Summit. And as you say, there's been Kyoto, there's been Paris, and endless agreements that have been signed since. What would Brazil do concretely? I mean, is there a leadership role on climate change that you could take? Because as you say, it is poor people, particularly in the global south, who are paying the heaviest price.
Rita, certainly Brazil, if the Workers' Party goes back to rule this country, we will treat with 100% seriousness the environmental issue. We have already proved that in the past, and we'll prove it once again. It is possible to grow, to the economy to develop itself, conserving the environment, and to use environmental preservation or conservation as a value, as a formula to do well to the Brazilian people. The Brazilian people wants that, and I can reassure you that if I come back to govern this country, we will take very seriously the environmental issue, and we will talk with other political leaders in the world. We'll talk with all the countries in the world so that everybody should take responsibility. And I hope that to have this opportunity once again, if I run for the presidency in my country next year again.
And if you do run for the presidency, and if you are elected, undoubtedly one of the lingering, nagging issues that you will have to deal with is race relations in Brazil. We don't often hear very much said about that, but it's a very real issue in your country. And I'm sure you followed the turmoil here in the United States after the assassination of George Floyd. Since then, the question of indigenous peoples, of people of African descent, has been much more prominent in many countries. Ethnicity, race relations are a problem in so many countries in the Western Hemisphere. Since Brazil became a republic, it has had 38 presidents, I believe, but they were all white men, except for your successor, Dilma Rousseff, who's a woman, but also white. So my question is this, it's quite simple. Is Brazil ready for a president of color? And I'm asking you this because quite often the cleavages between the left and the right mask the other more profound divisions within society, not only of social class, but of ethnicity as well.
Eu acho que o Brasil está mais do que preparado para ter
I believe that Brazil is more than ready to have a woman of color or a man of color. It's important to remember, although I'm not a Black person, I would like to say to you that I was the first worker coming from a shop floor in a plant that was elected president of this country. I was the only true turnover that happened in power. It was the first time in 500 years of history that a metal worker reached the presidency, reached the political leadership of a country. And I was very proud to put a first women in the presidency. We did that too. So I'm proud of that. But I can say to you that my party is working and preparing ourselves so that we one day could put our Black brothers as presidents of the Republic, as candidates. I believe that, I don't know if you're aware, Rita, but I don't have a university degree. And I am the president that most built federal universities in Brazil. I don't know if you're aware that we doubled the number of university students. And today we have 51% of the students in university are Blacks or Browns. And so the truth of the matter, since the Republic in 1889, the Blacks continue to be marginalized as before during the slavery. And now we're undergoing a very quick process to try to unblock racism in Brazil, to try to build a society that is a civilized, humanitarian, democratic, and plural, where no one could be suffer prejudice by their color, by their height, by the weight that they were born. And so I could say to you that it will be no surprise if Brazil soon will elect a woman or a Black man or Black woman. And I can tell you that it could come from my party.
Finally, Mr. President, my last question, an easy one. In 1 year from now, who will win the Football World Cup in Qatar?
Olha, depois da vergonha que eu passei com a Copa do Mundo aqui no Brasil.
After the shameful situation that I have suffered here in Brazil with the World Cup, Brazil losing 7-1 to Germany, I don't think that Brazil is doing well. I think Brazil was better in the past. I don't think we're doing well. We have a team that is playing a good soccer. France, Italy are strong teams. We have the UK is getting better. I believe that Spain also has a good team. I believe that Brazil will always have a potential. Brazil will always have to be taken seriously in account. But sincerely, in 2022, it's going to be for 20 years that Brazil doesn't win a World Cup. It will be 20 years that. So every Brazilian that has till 20 years of age never saw watch Brazil win a World Cup. And so we can take the risk for Germany, have a tie with us in Italy and become 5 times world champions. And so let's see if the Brazilian coach managed to structure a good team so that we can win the cup. If I could play, I would offer myself to be playing the team. But since I can't play, I can't offer myself. I can only be just a soccer fan for the team.
So you're not willing to bet just yet on the Brazilian team?
Não quero apostar.
No, I don't want to bet. I am a fan, so we want to win, but we need humility. I have to respect my adversaries.
President Lula, great pleasure to speak with you. I look forward to the opportunity of speaking with you again face-to-face in Brazil. But for now, thank you so much for making the time.
Obrigado, Rita.
Thank you very much, Rita. Thank you very much for your questions. Thank you for your care. And I hope to meet you, who knows, in the 2022 elections, and that you could come and travel around Brazil a little bit to get to know Brazil outside Rio, São Paulo, and to go to the northeast of Brazil, to go to the center west of Brazil, to live with the actual people of this country. A great hug to you, and thank you very much.
Lula da Silva may be guarded on the outcome of next year's World Cup, and for good reason. Since it last won in 2002, Brazil's national team has been in crisis. In crisis, just like Brazil's political scene. Since Lula left office, his successor, Dilma Rousseff, was impeached, and her successor, Michel Temer, was disgraced and arrested. He himself was imprisoned for 580 days before being cleared, and President Bolsonaro may be looking at criminal charges down the barrel. If Lula is also guarded about a possible candidacy, the question is not if, but when he will make that formal announcement. And if polls have it right, Lula will match the record of Brazil's icon, Pelé, who, also from humble beginnings, lifted the FIFA World Cup 3 times for his country. And so, will Lula win a 3rd term? In politics, as in football, anything can happen. That's all from me, Rida Fakhri. Thanks for watching. See you next time.